There's a quiet kind of magic that happens when you realize you don't need a sprawling backyard or rows of orchard trees to enjoy the sweetness of homegrown fruit. You and I have walked enough seasons together to know that gardening isn't really about square footage. It's about creating small pockets of joy wherever life places us. And today, dear friend, I want to invite you into a different way of thinking about fruit trees, one that fits beautifully on a porch, a balcony, or even the sunniest corner of a small patio. Over the years, I've met so many gardeners who thought fruit was something reserved for people with acres of land. I used to think that myself until a neighbor of mine, a retired teacher named Linda, showed me a tiny lemon tree she kept by her laundry room door. She'd grown it for years, carrying it inside every winter like an old friend she refused to leave in the cold. The year I first tasted one of her homegrown lemons, bright and fragrant as sunshine and appeal, I finally understood you don't need more space, just more imagination. Since then, I've watched people in apartments, condos, townhouses, and senior communities transform the smallest spaces into edible sanctuaries. And what fills me with hope is knowing that you can too. Whether your hands are strong or a little slower these days, container fruit trees meet you where you are. They lift your harvest to waist height. They let you shape your garden around your body, not the other way around. And most beautifully, they give you fruit with a story fruit you tended, checked on, smiled at, and picked when it felt ready. So settle in with me, friend. Let's explore the 10 fruiting wonders that thrive not in wide open fields, but in the calm, cherished corners of the spaces we call home. It's funny how certain gardening myths settle into our minds and stay there for years, sometimes decades. One of the biggest ones I hear, especially from friends in retirement communities or folks who've downsized, is this idea that fruit simply needs room. They picture orchards stretching across rolling hills or trees planted so far apart that you'd need a long afternoon just to walk between them. And yes, that's one way to grow fruit, but it's far from the only way. The truth is, many fruit trees actually thrive when their roots are gently contained, almost as if the pot gives them boundaries that help them focus their energy. I once chatted with an older gentleman at a local garden center. His name was Harold, a widower who'd moved into a small apartment after his wife passed. He told me he missed the apple tree they used to sit under together. When I asked why he didn't try a container apple, he laughed and said, "Fruit trees don't grow in pots." We walked through the nursery, and I showed him columnar apples, dwarf cherries, and a fig hardly taller than his cane. He stood there quiet, running his hand along the little fig's leaves, and said, "All these years, I never knew." A few months later, he sent a picture of that same fig sitting proudly on his balcony, already leafing out as if it had something to prove. That's when it hit me again. The biggest barrier to growing fruit in small spaces isn't space at all, it's belief. Sometimes we tell ourselves we've missed our chance or that we don't have the right tools or the right land or the right climate. But container fruit trees rewrite that story. They shrink the orchard to a scale that fits your life today, your porch, your patio, your abilities, your season of living. And once you see the first blossom or bite into the first homegrown fruit, you realize the myth was never true. It never had to be. Before we dive into the specific trees, I want to gently highlight why container fruit growing is such a gift, especially for those of us who are navigating changing bodies, smaller living spaces, or simply a desire for a simpler kind of gardening. In a pot, a fruit tree becomes not just a plant, but a companion, something you can move with ease, something you can elevate so you're not bending as much, something that grows at a pace that suits your quieter mornings. What many people love most is the sense of control a container offers. Instead of wrestling with soil that's too heavy, too clay-like, too sandy, or filled with old roots, you start with a fresh mix tailored to your tree. You're creating a personalized home for it, one scoop at a time. And believe me that small beginning makes all the difference. I remember a woman named Judith who joined a gardening class I used to teach. She used a walker and told me she felt left out whenever people talked about home orchards. The uneven ground in her old yard made outdoor work intimidating. When we introduced her to container fruit trees, her whole posture shifted. She found a sturdy, rolling plant caddy online, placed a dwarf lemon on it, and suddenly she was tending fruit at the perfect height, no wobbling, no strain. The change in her confidence was beautiful. Within a year, she had 3 trees, all in pots. She could move with one gentle push. That's the freedom container. Gardening gives accessibility, adaptability, and a gentler way of interacting with nature. And let's not forget the emotional side of it. There is something deeply satisfying about checking on a tree each morning, watching tiny buds form, or seeing the first blush of ripening fruit. When that little pot on your balcony becomes a source of nourishment, both for your body and your spirit, it feels like a quiet victory. And every gardener deserves that victory, no matter how much space they have. Now let's begin with a fruit tree that surprises almost everyone, the humble pomegranate. Most people picture pomegranates as exotic, thirsty trees that belong in wide, sun-baked landscapes, but they're actually one of the most forgiving and container-friendly fruits you can grow. Their naturally compact root systems make them perfectly suited for pots. Even pots you can lift or shift without too much strain. And unlike fussier fruit trees that sulk when confined, pomegranates seem to appreciate the cozy environment. I once met a couple in their 70s who lived in a senior apartment complex with nothing but a small concrete balcony. They told me they missed the fruit trees from their old home, but thought those days were behind them. When I suggested a dwarf pomegranate variety, their eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that makes gardening priceless. A month later, they sent a photo of their little tree barely knee-high, but crowned with bright orange blossoms that looked like tiny lanterns. By the end of the season, that small tree produced nearly 20 fruits. They said every harvest felt like a celebration. What makes pomegranates so wonderful is how low maintenance they are. You don't need rich soil or constant watering. In fact, once established, a pomegranate prefers to dry out slightly between soakings. For gardeners who travel, have busy schedules, or simply want a tree that doesn't demand attention, this resilience is a blessing. And the fruit itself, deep red, jewel-like seeds bursting with sweet tart flavor, offers a kind of reward that feels far greater than the effort required. Grocery store pomegranates can get expensive, especially when organic. So growing your own not only saves money, but also guarantees freshness and flavor. In a container, these trees stay manageable, productive, and beautiful, offering both food and ornamental charm. A little balcony, sun, a well-draining pot, and minimal care are all they need to thrive. If pomegranates are the quiet overachievers of container gardening, figs are the joyful show-offs. There's something almost theatrical about the way a fig tree grows broad, hand-shaped leaves that look sculpted fruit that swells seemingly overnight, and a sturdiness that makes even new gardeners feel capable. What surprises most people is that figs don't just tolerate containers, they often prefer them. Their roots, like a bit of confinement, almost as if being gently hugged by the pot, helps them channel energy more efficiently into fruit production. And once they're settled, they reward you generously. I once helped a neighbor named Ellen choose her first container fruit tree. She lived alone and wanted something easy, something forgiving. Uh, I suggested a dwarf fig, and she was hesitant, remembering the giant, unruly fig her parents once had that needed constant pruning. But I promised her that a potted fig behaves differently, more polite, more compact, more focused. 3 months later, she asked me to stop by. On her little patio sat a fig tree, not even 4 feet tall, but it was loaded with swelling green and purple fruit. She cupped one gently and said, I didn't think I could grow anything anymore. But this one, it's taking care of me as much as I take care of it. That's the beauty of figs. They make you feel successful even on your busiest or most tired days. They fruit on new growth, so even if winter knocks them back, they bounce right up and try again. And the flavor of a homegrown fig, soft, honeyed, warm from the sun, is incomparable to anything in a store. Container figs need only a sunny spot, moderate watering, and the occasional light pruning to stay at their best. For gardeners with limited space or mobility, they offer abundance without overwhelm, a beauty without effort, and a taste of sweetness that feels like a reward for simply showing up each day. Blueberries might be small, but they often leave gardeners feeling defeated, usually because traditional garden soil simply doesn't give them what they need. In the ground, they struggle with pH that's too high, soil that stays too wet or too dry, or nutrients that drift out of balance. But in containers, blueberries transform from fussy divas into dependable producers. The magic lies in control. You create the soil, you set the pH, and the plant responds with gratitude. Years ago, I met a retired nurse named Clara who adored blueberries, but had sworn them off after 3 failed attempts in her backyard beds. When she moved into a townhouse with a small patio, she decided to try one more time, this time in a large pot. She mixed her soil with peat moss, added a slow-release organic fertilizer meant for acid-loving plants, and placed the container where morning sun gently warmed it each day. By midsummer, her little blueberry bush was heavy with fruit. I remember her telling me, I thought I lost my touch. Turns out I just needed a pot big enough for a fresh start. Blueberries are also wonderfully polite neighbors in a container garden. They stay compact, often under 3 feet tall, and their spring flowers and fall foliage add beauty that lasts long beyond berry season. A single healthy plant can give you pounds of berries, sweet, plump, and deeply flavored in a way grocery store blueberries rarely are. And because the pot isolates them, you can easily adjust their care when the weather shifts. If a frost threatens, bring them close to the house. If the sun changes angles in late summer, slide them to a brighter spot. This gentle adaptability makes blueberries one of the most rewarding fruits for seniors, apartment dwellers, or anyone craving simplicity. They ask for little but give so much in return, proving that even the smallest plant can offer big joy when given the right home. Now let's talk about a tree that feels almost like bringing a little sunshine right to your doorstep, the Meyer lemon. If there's one fruit tree that consistently surprises people with how well it behaves in a pot, it's this one. Meyer lemons are naturally compact, gentle growers, and they produce almost continuously, offering blossoms, tiny green fruits, and bright yellow lemons all at once. There's something incredibly uplifting about stepping outside on a cool morning and catching that sweet, floral citrus scent drifting from a tree you can practically wrap your arms around. Years ago, I knew a woman named Susan who lived in a small upstairs apartment. She told me she missed having a garden, but didn't think anything meaningful would grow on her second-floor deck. One day, I helped her pick out a Meyer lemon in a simple terracotta pot. She hesitated at first, worrying she wouldn't be able to care for it. But once she saw the first cluster of white blossoms, like tiny stars glowing against dark leaves, her confidence grew. By the end of the year, that tree produced nearly 50 lemons. She used them for lemonade cooking, even homemade cleaner. What she loved most of all was how the tree made her space feel alive, fragrant, and full of possibility. Container-grown lemons respond well to attentive but not strenuous care. A little sunlight, some well-draining soil, and gentle fertilizer are enough to keep them thriving. And because the tree stays mobile, you can bring it indoors during cold snaps, protecting it easily without needing to cover or wrap anything heavy. For gardeners with limited strength or unpredictable weather, this sense of control is empowering. Meyer lemons turn small spaces into citrus sanctuaries. They remind us that beauty and abundance can flourish in the most modest pots, offering not just fruit, but a daily moment of brightness that feels almost like a gift. Peaches often feel like a luxury fruit, the kind you imagine growing on tall, sprawling trees in warm orchards where you need a ladder just to greet the branches. But dwarf peach varieties completely rewrite that story. These compact trees, especially those bred for containers, offer the same lush blossoms and full-sized fruit without the towering height or demanding care. And when you grow them in a pot, you suddenly gain the ability to control nearly every element that would normally make peaches challenging frost pests, even overcrowding. I once met a retired mail carrier named Robert, who swore peaches were too fussy for anyone without a full backyard. He had tried growing a tree in the ground decades earlier, only to lose most of the fruit to late, cold snaps and birds. After moving into a smaller home, he thought peach season was behind him. Then, one spring, during a plant sale, he spotted a bonanza dwarf peach in full bloom and decided to take a chance. He kept the tree on his patio in a large clay pot, bringing it closer to the house whenever the nighttime temperatures dipped. That simple ability to move it just a few feet made all the difference. By midsummer, his tree was heavy with velvety, golden peaches. He laughed when he told me the story, saying, "All those years chasing peaches in the yard, and all I needed was a container on wheels." Container-grown peaches do need one thoughtful step, thinning the baby fruits early in the season. Removing some may feel counterintuitive, but it lets the remaining peaches grow larger, sweeter, and healthier. And the harvest, when it comes, is unforgettable. Tree-ripened peaches have a fragrance and juiciness that no store peach can match. For gardeners longing for summer sweetness, but not the strain of managing a huge tree, dwarf peaches offer an elegant, accessible solution, proof that some of life's best flavors can be grown right at arm's reach. Cherries have a way of capturing our imagination. Maybe it's the spring blossoms that look like soft pink clouds, or the way the fruit glows like tiny red gems in early summer. But for many gardeners, cherries also come with memories of frustration, birds stealing the harvest trees, growing too tall, or ladders becoming unsafe with age. That's why dwarf cherry varieties are such a revelation for small space growers. These compact trees bring all the beauty and sweetness of cherries without the towering height or complicated care. A few years back, I knew a couple named Marjorie and Frank, who downsized into a cozy retirement community. Frank loved cherries, but could no longer manage climbing for harvest, and Marjorie didn't want the mess of fruit dropping from an overgrown tree. When they discovered dwarf cherries, especially the Romeo and Juliet varieties, it felt like a small miracle. They placed their new tree in a wide ceramic pot right beside their patio chairs. Not only could they reach every branch, but when cherry season arrived, all they needed was a lightweight net to protect the fruit. No ladders, no scrapes, no disappointment, just bowl after bowl of tangy sweet cherries enjoyed under the afternoon sun. What makes container cherries so satisfying is the balance they strike between ornament and usefulness. In early spring, the blossoms transform even the simplest patio into a painting, and by summer, the fruit offers enough for fresh snacking, baking, or preserving. A mature dwarf cherry in a pot can easily produce 10 to 15 pounds of fruit, far more than most people expect from such a small tree. And because the container limits root spread, the tree stays manageable and easy to inspect. You can catch pests early, adjust watering with precision, and move the pot slightly if the season brings too much heat or too little light. For gardeners craving a touch of romance and flavor without the trouble, dwarf cherries offer joy in a beautifully compact package, proof that small trees can still hold big memories. Apple trees often feel like the classic symbol of a full backyard garden: wide branches, long ladders, and big harvests stored in wooden crates. But columnar apples turn that entire image on its head. Instead of spreading outward, these unique trees grow tall and narrow, almost like elegant green pillars, topped with clusters of blossoms and fruit. Their slender shape makes them ideal for gardeners with limited room or those who prefer plants that stay tidy and predictable. I once visited a retired couple, Dennis and Marie, who lived in a small duplex with a narrow side patio, barely wide enough for 2 chairs. They told me they missed the big apple tree they had raised their kids under, but didn't think apples were in their future anymore. When I mentioned columnar apples, they looked doubtful until I brought one over. The tree stood like a living lamppost, straight and compact. Marie ran her hand up the trunk and said, "It's like an apple tree in skinny jeans." They placed 2 trees, one North Pole and one Golden Sentinel, along their patio fence. By the end of their first full season, each tree produced more than a dozen crisp, flavorful apples. They sent me a photo of their harvest, arranged neatly in a small basket, proud as ever. Container-grown columnar apples are easy to maintain because the fruit grows close to the central trunk, making thinning, pruning, and picking simple and safe. You don't need a ladder. You barely need to stretch. And because the trees stay small, you can inspect every inch for pests, something nearly impossible with full-size apples. Perhaps the greatest gift of columnar apples is how much they offer while taking up so little space. You can line them along a balcony, group them symmetrically on a patio, or even place one beside a sunny window. They blend practicality with beauty, giving gardeners a taste of orchard life in just a few feet of space. Strawberries may not be trees, but they earn their place on this list because no other container fruit delivers so much reward in such a small footprint. For many gardeners, strawberries were a childhood treat. Warm, berries plucked straight from the ground, stained fingers, stained lips, and a sweetness you never quite forget. But ground-grown strawberries often come with challenges: pests, sprawling, runners, and bending that gets harder with time. When you grow strawberries in containers, all of those difficulties melt away. You lift the plants to a comfortable height, protect the berries more easily, and enjoy fruit that seems to appear almost faster than you can pick it. I once worked with a gentleman named Paul, a cheerful man in his 80s, who used a cane and told me he missed tending the strawberry patch he once shared with his late wife. He said he couldn't manage kneeling anymore, so he assumed strawberries were a memory. I suggested he try growing ever-bearing varieties in a tall, multi-tiered strawberry pot. He planted 8 little starts, watered them with the same tenderness he once gave his garden beds, and by midsummer, he was picking berries nearly every day. He'd sit in his patio chair, lean over gently, and pluck the reddest ones to share with neighbors. He told me, "It feels like I got a piece of my old life back." That's what container strawberries do. They offer abundance with very little strain, Everbearing types produce from spring through fall, giving you a steady trickle of fruit for months. And because strawberries send out runners, you can easily root new plants from your best producers, creating a self-renewing cycle that costs almost nothing. Whether you use hanging baskets, stackable towers, or simple clay pot strawberries reward creativity. They're ideal for small balconies, sunny windows, or patios where every inch counts. And when you taste the first berry of the season, sun-warm, deeply flavored, and grown with your own hands, you'll understand why strawberries, though small, deserve a very big spot in any container garden. Avocados often feel like the holy grail of home gardening, delicious, nutritious, and notoriously expensive in the grocery store. Many people assume they need a warm climate and a sprawling yard to grow them, but dwarf avocado varieties have quietly changed the rules. These compact trees can thrive in containers for decades, offering fruit that feels like a luxury straight from your own patio. What surprises gardeners most is how well avocados adapt to pots. When given what they truly need, excellent drainage, steady warmth, and patience. I once knew a man named Gerald, an engineer who moved into a condo after retiring. He told me he ate an avocado every morning, but never imagined growing one. When he finally tried a dwarf variety in a large terracotta pot, he treated the process like a project, choosing the right soil mix, adding coarse bark for airflow, and placing the pot where it caught gentle morning sun without scorching. It took nearly 3 years before the first small green fruits appeared, but when the day came, Gerald beamed like a proud parent. It's strange, he said, watching something grow slowly makes you feel young again, and that is the quiet truth of container avocados. They teach you to enjoy the long game. Once mature, these trees can produce 20 to 30 fruits a year, each one creamy rich and worlds better than most store-bought avocados. Because the tree stays mobile, gardeners in cooler climates can bring it indoors during winter, creating a temporary tropical corner beside a bright window. And since dwarf avocados are self-pollinating, you only need one tree to enjoy a harvest. Growing an avocado in a pot isn't about instant results. It's about giving yourself permission to nurture something steady and slow, then savoring the payoff for years to come. For small space gardeners with a patient heart, few fruits feel as rewarding. Bananas are one of those fruits most people assume are completely out of reach unless you live in a tropical climate or have acres of space. But dwarf banana varieties rewrite that expectation entirely. These remarkable plants aren't true trees at all, yet they deliver full-size bananas with a vigor and enthusiasm that feels almost magical in a container garden. What makes bananas so special is how quickly they reward your care. Many container-grown varieties produce fruit in as little as 18 months apace that feels downright generous in the world of fruiting plants. I once met a grandmother named Evelyn, who lived in a senior apartment with a warm south-facing balcony. She loved tropical plants, but never imagined growing bananas herself. One spring, she decided to try a dwarf Cavendish in a wide rolling pot. Each week, she'd send me photos as the giant leaves unfurled broad emerald green and fluttering in the breeze like flags of a faraway island. When her plant finally produced its first flower, she cried happy tears. The blossom looked like a purple lantern glowing in the morning sun. By late summer, she had a full bunch of bananas forming. She invited her grandchildren over to watch them ripen, and when the fruit was ready, she called it the sweetest victory of my life. That's the magic bananas bring. They turn ordinary spaces into miniature jungles full of life and movement, yet they're surprisingly simple to care for. Give them rich soil, steady moisture, warmth, and protection from cold, and they'll thrive. During winter, gardeners in cooler climates can bring them indoors where they go semi-dormant and rest until spring returns. And when the main stalk finishes fruiting, it naturally dies back while sending up new shoots called pups. These can be repotted, shared, or grown into new fruiting plants. It's a cycle of renewal that makes container bananas feel almost poetic. A reminder that even in small spaces, fresh beginnings are always possible. Before we wrap up our list, there's one simple practice that transforms every container fruit tree. We've talked about mulching. It may not sound glamorous, but mulch is the quiet hero of successful container gardening. A layer of wood chips or straw on top of your pots acts like a warm blanket in winter and a cool shade cloth in summer, helping your trees handle temperature swings without stress. I once visited a small community garden where the volunteers tended dozens of container fruit trees. Some were thriving while others looked tired and thirsty. The difference, mulch. One of the gardeners, a soft-spoken man named Theodore, showed me two nearly identical dwarf citrus trees growing side by side. One had a fresh layer of wood chips, the other bare soil. He gently pushed his fingers beneath each surface. Beneath the mulch, the soil was cool, moist, and full of earth life. Beneath the exposed soil, it was dry and warm, even though both trees were watered the same day. That moment stuck with me. Mulch doesn't just help retain moisture, it reduces watering frequency, protects delicate roots, and feeds the soil as it slowly breaks down. For seniors who want gardening to remain joyful rather than exhausting, this small step makes a world of difference. No heavy lifting, no complicated technique, just a simple sprinkle of organic material that gives back tenfold. And it's often free. Tree service companies, landscapers, and even local parks departments are usually happy to give away wood chips they would otherwise discard. A few scoops into a bucket and you have enough to cover several containers. Mulch also creates a softer, more polished look for your pots, making your garden feel intentionally designed rather than pieced together. It's amazing how such an ordinary material can elevate both the health of your plants and the beauty of your space. If you adopt only one new habit from this entire list, let it be this one. Mulch turns good container trees into great ones, quietly supporting them through every season. As we reach the end of this gentle walk through small space fruit gardening, I hope you're feeling something warm and encouraging settling into your heart. Because more than the trees themselves, this journey is really about possibility. It's about remembering that growth doesn't require grandness and that even in the later chapters of life, new beginnings can sprout in the simplest corners. I've seen people in wheelchairs tending peaches on their patios, couples in tiny apartments harvesting lemons beside their sliding doors, and retirees who believed their gardening days were over, suddenly rediscovering that old spark through a single potted fruit tree. And maybe the most beautiful part is this: each tree you grow becomes a quiet companion. It teaches patience, rewards care, and reminds you that slow, steady tending still creates sweetness. I think of a friend of mine, Anne, who planted a columnar apple tree the year she turned 68. She told me she chose it because she wanted something that would grow with her. Every autumn, she'd pick the apples, one by one, storing them with pride. Last year, she smiled and said, "It's funny. The tree is aging with me, but it still finds a way to give and give." That's what these container fruit trees offer: an invitation to nurture life at a scale that fits who you are today. No ladders, no heavy digging, just a few pots, a bit of sun, and the willingness to believe that Abundance can bloom in ordinary places. So, dear friend, as you look around your balcony, patio, or sunny window, imagine the possibilities waiting there. Imagine the blossoms, the fragrances, the harvests, and the quiet joy of growing something wonderful with your own hands. Wherever you are, you can still grow beauty, flavor, and hope, and I'll be cheering you on every step of the way.